Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning this episode of Nick Egan Times. On this episode, we have an extraordinary guest. We have someone who has had an unbelievable and amazing impact in hip hop and R&B as we know it. We have the legendary Mark Money Green. Mark is the founder of Celebrity Talent Agency Inc., the chairman of artist relations at the Hip Hop Museum, and the general manager of Lehman Center of the Performing Arts. Throughout Mark's legendary career, Mark has worked and collaborated with some of the biggest superstars on the planet, to name a few, which includes Prince, Usher, Diana Ross, Will Smith, Jay-Z, Aaliyah, Eddie Murphy, Salt-N-Pepa, Dru Hill, Melba Moore, Missy Elliott, Timbaland, Lil Jon, and the Backstreet Boys, and many more. Mark has released his new and incredible book, The Show Must Go On, Backstage Stories of a Hip Hop Agent, which is now available to order online through Amazon and his website. Welcome to the legendary Mark Green, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Nick. Glad to be here.
Welcome. All right, let's jump straight into it about your book. Tell me about that and how that transpired. It's amazing.
What was that? I didn't catch the first part.
Tell me about your amazing and insightful new book, The Show Must Go On.
Well, Nick, my book tells my story from the beginning, me being paralyzed and being able to walk again. Then I jumped right into basically where hip hop almost started. It was 1977. I was approached by a DJ to be in the Battle of the DJs in the Bronx. And during that time, that was the first time I actually heard rapping. And I was totally blown away by it. I was so excited. I went home that same night and wrote my first rap. And that weekend, I became ghetto famous in my neighborhood.
Incredible. And what can people that obviously buy it, purchase it, what can they get? What insights would they be able to get from that?
Well, the thing, Nick, my book really demonstrates what it was like coming up in the early 80s and hip hop, the beginning of hip hop, where it started. You will get the stories to find out what it was like. Of course, there was also the drug area as well in the 80s. So there's a lot of, you'll see some implications of drugs and everything else that happened in hip hop, the early days of hip hop. But I think for the readers, the stories that you're going to enjoy is how it really got started, the things that we kind of went through, the little bit of money we were making, like 1,500 a show, and just see the overall view of how hip hop was kind of created and started.
Amazing. All right, tell me about you started obviously Celebrity Talent Agency, how that began. And that's incredible. I was looking obviously up, you work with some of the biggest superstars on the planet. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, my agency really came out of default one year. I was out of work. I had worked in the record business, worked as a manager and everything else. I had no job. And one day a guy called me. He said, "Hey, can you book Freddie Jackson, Charlie Wilson, Gap Band, and Keith Sweat?" And I did. I wasn't an agent anymore, but I had the connections. So I made those connections. I made $10,000 off that booking. And right then and there, I said, I have a job, so let me just start a booking agency. So I took that 10,000 and got a couple table desks and phones, and that's how it all started. And it's been going on now 26 years I'm going on with that
Incredible.
business.
That's incredible. And tell me about being the chairman of artist relationships at the Hip Hop Museum. And more importantly, what does that mean to you?
Well, it was an honor. It was, I had been working at the museum probably for about 2 years, and there weren't really any titles. I was just contributing, my knowledge and what I knew. When I was actually the attorney for the museum, who also lives in Sweden, he suggested that I become the chairman of the artist relations because of my relationships with all these artists. Back in the early 80s, Nick, I had opportunity to work with everybody that was coming up. So it was easy for me to transform into becoming an agent in my own company because everybody knew me. They worked with me during the Fresh Fest and all those beginning shows back in the day. So it was a no-brainer. So to be able to be the chair of artist relationships was not a problem for me, and I'm honored to have that position.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you were the executive, a record executive, music executive. Um, how did you think that shaped your career, and how did you enjoy that?
I'm a planner, Nick. So, one thing I did was I kind of planned out my career. Although, you didn't actually go step from step. There was always some type of backslide or something that would stop you from getting to where you want to go. But it was at a time where I had already was on the road with Boogie Boys, and I had just finished I'll Be Sure, and I was offered to be the road manager for Heavy D and the Boys. And at that point, I had already spent like 2 or 3 years touring, and I was like, no. I turned it down because my desire was to get into the record business. And I finally got in there, blood, sweat, and tears, and it was kind of amazing and it definitely journey that you'll read about in the book because some of the things that you see that happen and how I got in there and what I had to deal with would definitely blow your mind.
Yeah, incredible. And looking back at your career, you've obviously been to some of the biggest events, or you've been a part of them anyway. What are some that stand out and that you can share with us?
I was just telling a friend the other day, one of the Sugar Hill Gang guys, I ran into him in the supermarket. And I was telling him, we were talking about, artists and people taking dates for lower money or less money. And I explained to him, I said, when I started managing Grandmaster Flash, we started touring the world. I went to 17 countries with him. He's probably been to over 100. But what really blew my mind was that we would headline festivals. I'm talking about in London, UK, Germany, France, but we were getting paid the least amount of money. And I had to beg him and ask him, please don't take this money. Look at this. You're the headliner. You got bands, you got other DJs, and you're getting paid less than everybody else. But for him, it was just the money was constantly coming in, and he didn't want to break that vibe. But eventually I was able to convince him to move on, hold back until you get a little bit more money.
Right. And with your experience in the industry, what was the best advice you ever received that especially helped you going forward into your career?
I didn't hear that. What was the best
What was
what?
the best piece of advice you ever received in your career?
Oh, there was a few things. I say one thing when I was trying to make my decision, I had a job at ABC Booking and I was offered a job for William Morris and I didn't know what to do. And I asked a veteran record company person, what should I do? He said, well, let me ask you a question. Do you want to be a big fish in a little pond or a small fish in a big pond? And I thought about it and I said, I want to be the big fish in the little pond. That was my choice. I stayed with ABC. Eventually, I went to William Morris. It didn't work out for me, and I left and went back to ABC.
And say there was a young Mark Green coming up, what advice would you give them?
Well, the advice I would give the young Mark Green and is, follow your dreams, follow your passion. You have to have passion in order to be successful for what you want to do. I had the passion and everything I wanted to learn about this business. I read trades. I went to the library. I studied, every job that was in the industry. I wanted to know how everything worked. Even when I come home, even today, I still do the same thing. I don't just sit back and say, oh, well, this is happening. Oh, I don't want to learn that. I try to learn everything it is about this business because what I've learned with my past experience, Nick, is that everything repeats itself. And I also realize that as we move on to the next step, what you learn in the past will help you in the future. So you have to just keep yourself motivated, keep the passion, and continue to learn.
That's really great. What what do you want your legacy to be? When you look back at your career, what would you like to be remembered and your legacy to be?
Well, if when you read my book, you're going to see that a lot of people say one thing about me, and everybody says the same, is I had integrity. I wasn't out to beat people. I didn't try to rip people off. I always try to do business correctly. And my legacy is I want to be that person that people look up to and say, well, you know what? He was confronted with this situation, but he didn't steer off to do the wrong thing. He didn't try to beat this artist for this money. He took the short, but he still got his as well. I just want to have that manuscript to pass on to the youth to say, hey, listen, you're gonna you're going to go through this and that. But at the end of the day, the show must go on. You can't look back and say, well, I wish I should have, could have, had her. You move forward because regardless whether you do or not, the show is still going to go on.
Exactly. Um, you work with so many high-profile people in your career. How did you manage these personalities, and what did you learn on your way with managing them or learning, dealing with them?
Let me tell you, that's still a learning process, Nick. I mean, what I've learned is you have to humble yourself. You can't allow your ego to overshadow their ego. Sometimes, a lot of people always say, Mark, you're so laid back or you're so this and that. And they say, how did you ever stay in this business? It's because I thought about, as I think about the things going forward, I made a lot of mistakes in the beginning, wanting to speak my mind, wanting to say this and that. And when you read in the book, you'll read the stories of how things cost me my position or caused me issues because I spoke too soon. What I learned is, you know what? You have to decide what battle you want to win. You got to sit back and say, if I say this, what's going to happen? So I've learned to actually master that, just don't say what's on your mind all the time. Think about at the end result, what do you want? What do you want to get out this when you say that? And that has stopped me from making a lot of bad mistakes. You deal with egos all the time, but at the end of the day, do you want the money? Do you want the artist to continue to work with you? Do you want to just be that badass that, oh, he's this and that? So to each his own. But for me, I just learned how to curb my words and just deal with the situations as they come about.
Yeah, that's really great. You were going to do a distribution with the late Prince. Tell me about that and how it was dealing with that as well.
But the crazy thing was I was so honored to even work with this guy. Prince is a visionary. He had everything. I mean, just to be next to him, he had to feel comfortable with you. And one of the things was, if people remember back in the day, he had slave written on the side of his face. And the reason he had that, and his whole objective to that was he said he was slave to his master. And people didn't really understand what that meant. But what it really meant was that his master music, his master's tapes that he owned, he didn't own. The record companies owned. So he was a slave to them. They were the masters. They were his masters. And that's how that whole terminology came about. So eventually he said, you know what? I'm tired of this. I want to start and do my own. He reached out to his attorney, who reached out to me and said, listen, I want to start my own distribution company and label. I want to be in control of my own destiny. I don't want to depend on them. I don't want them to own my masters. I don't want them to own anything. I want to do it myself. And that's what I was hired to do. I was hired to run his distribution company and to kind of create that whole situation for him.
Oh, thanks for sharing. With the specifically, let's go hip hop and R&B industry. From when you first started to where it is now, how do you think it's changed, and do you think it's got a lot better as well?
Well, Nick, to me, I really think it was better the way it used to be. And I say that because back in the day, you had to be an artist. You had to have creativity. There had to be something about you that people wanted to see or hear you. You had artist development, you had publicists, you had people who spent time creating your image or helping you visualize what you wanted to be. And all of that has changed now with the internet because now you can anybody could go on there and make a beat, make a song. They don't even sign you based on your creativity. They sign you based on your followers. I had a person one time that came to me and I thought the artist was excellent, and I was like, man, this artist is great. I'm gonna try to get him a deal. And the first thing the person said was, how many followers do they have? And I'm like, what? He said, yeah, how many Instagram followers? And I'm saying to myself, what the hell that has to do with this person? You haven't even heard him, listen to him. They
Yeah.
were more concerned about that because everything now is just like, it's just fast and quick. There's no concern about who this person is. And of course, have had some success with it because some people hit But if you look at all the people that are out there, you look at the streaming business, you hear artists now, I got 23 million streams and I got a check for 100,000, I mean, a check for $10,000. It doesn't make sense.
How how in short is the money compared to back then, compared it is to now? So what you just mentioned with the streams, was it bigger money versus how many streams it was back then, or how like a CDs or DVDs?
Well, back then it was the record companies were the pimps, because basically they would advance you, say, 400,000, $1 million. And again, that was an advance, meaning that they're going to give you this money. You say, hey, I need 2 million. Okay, I'll give you 2 million. But they're going to recoup that money back first, and then they're going to get theirs before you get yours. Where now it's like whatever you sell, but you don't have that manpower, that person to push you out there to create the image, to have that fan base that you really need. Everything is pretty much like, oh, have you heard this person? Yeah, oh yeah, I like his music, blah, blah, blah. But it's not really developing a fan base. You're developing a follower.
Yeah, really, that's really great insights. What's your biggest regret of your career?
My goodness, there's a couple. Um, One of my biggest regrets was I was at EMI Records for 12 years and I was offered a job at Arista and I wanted to be loyal to my company. I told them I was going to leave. They gave me more money, sang this sweet song to me. Oh, we want to keep you here, you this, you that. And I fell for it. In the end, EMI Records, we had no hits, no records, no real artists. Arista had everybody. They had Whitney Houston, they had Aretha Franklin. And that's one of my biggest mistakes because had I went to Arista, I would have had a chance to work with a lot more artists than I did at EMI and would have probably did a lot better in the record business because you have to understand the record business is a young man's game. Unless you become a Puffy or Jay-Z, you're out by the time you're 30, 35 years old. They're on to the next young kid. So, back then it was just basically about what you can do. And one of the advices that a person gave me, they said, Mark, while you're in there, start working on your way out. I said, what do you mean? They said, just don't sit there. Start figuring out what you want to do and how you want to do when you get it, what you want to do and how you're going to get out to do it.
Yeah, great. What's what's a what's a thing that people might not know about the great Mark Green?
Well, one of the things people don't know, and this is one of the reasons I wrote the book, I always had people, even my parents at one time, they would just say, oh, he works in music. No one really knew what I did. I have people confuse me as being a promoter. People confuse me as being all different titles, but nobody really understood what I did. One of the things I really wanted people to know, and I have to give thanks to Master G because he finally talked about it. And, Nick, in the beginning of 1977, I heard rap for the first time. I came back to my town. I became famous. I was on TV. By the time 79, when Rapper's Delight came out, I was in college. Nobody knew anything about me. Nobody cared. Nobody had any interest. And it was because of me introducing this art form to Master G, Guy O'Brien, who I went to high school with. He became that guy that I wanted to be. And for a long time, I would tell my friends, "Hey, I was a rap." They didn't. Nobody believed me because I had no proof. And then it wasn't until Master G really started doing interviews, and they would say, "Well, how did you get in the game?" And he would say, "Well, upperclassmen turned me on." And there was one guy, Jay Kwan, a historian, who finally dug a little deeper. He said, "Well, who was the upperclassman?" And when he said it was a guy named Mark Green. And from that point on, he started really just saying my name in all the interviews, and it allowed me to get my, so-called, what I want to say, so-called talent or so-called being recognized for something that I brought to the town. I mean, rap started in the Bronx. I grew up in Jersey. I brought it to Jersey. It was my doing that allowed him to be who he was. Master G made the first rap record, Rapper's Delight. And now he gives me credit, and I'm thankful for it. And the funny thing is about not only does he give me credit, he tells everybody he's a millionaire because of me.
Wow.
And he did the forward in my book. So the best thing about this is that he wrote the forward. He told the real story in the forward, and I'm honored. I'm honored that he even acknowledged me because if he didn't, I would have never wrote the book. I would have never really had a reason to tell my story, and we wouldn't be sitting here having this interview.
Wow. That's well, thanks for sharing. Um, what inspires you daily?
What inspires me daily?
What inspires you daily?
I am inspired. I have the passion. I mean, I love getting up to work. I love trying to close deals. I love booking shows. I also run a theater. I love presenting artists in the theater. I love trying to give them advice. I love making things happen, and I love to fix problems. There's always an issue. I was telling someone earlier today. I says, one of the craziest things that happened to me this past year was during a show, a guy died on stage while the show was going on, and the musicians didn't stop playing. Everybody continued. They dragged him off on the side of the stage. But at the end of the day, what happened? The show went on. So in the book, as I say, the show must go on. And you will read in the book all these different types of things that happened to me, where I had to make a decision or a decision had to be made, whether I would do it or not. At the end of the day, the show goes on. And that's
Yeah.
the reason why I named the book, The Show Must Go On.
Yeah, it's great. Like it's a great line for it too. I really love it. What's been your proudest achievement of your career?
Whew. Well, there's been a few. One, of course, discovering hip hop and introducing it to Master G. One, being able to be a trendsetter in terms of some of the things I did. I was able to go teach music one day and find a girl that was in my class. She had a group called Divine, and I got them a deal. They became the opening act for Britney Spears. They went on to tour, had a #1 pop record called Lately. I was able to do, for a long time, I'm a musician. I was able to write and produce a #1 R&B song and also a top 10 hip hop song. So those were some of the things that, I take away from that.
That's amazing, your career. Um, and if you were 18 again and you could go back in time and you could change one thing, it could be personally or professionally, what would you change?
I think I would be, I've always been kind of shy and laid back. I think I would be more aggressive. I think I would take a little bit more chances instead of being steadfast. I think I would look back and kind of, because I was always cautious. I always wanted to make sure I did the right thing. And sometimes, you have to take that chance. Sometimes you got to step out on that rope and in faith, and hopefully everything will work out. I was always too careful and too cautious. I think if I had took more chances, I probably would have been the next Puffy or Jay-Z.
I think you would have been too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Mark, thanks for coming on the podcast. I do appreciate it and your time. It's incredible, your career. It's been illustrious. And yeah, even your book, everything. It's just sensation.
Thank you, Nick. I just want everybody to know, listen, you can buy the book on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, so you go to my website, markmoneygreen.com. If you want to find me, you can find me on Instagram at Celebrity Talent Inc. or Facebook Celebrity Talent Agency. And I want to thank you, Nick, for having me. I promise you, when I come to Australia, I'll be right there looking for you.
Yeah, brother, we'll have a great time. We'll have an amazing time.
Yes.
Yeah, have a good day and we'll chat soon.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.